Oh, brilliant.
Bear that in mind, please, and also if you want to speak, please indicate in the usual way.
Chair, Martin has switched his view to live, so the stream is now live, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Audit and Corporate Governance Scrutiny Committee. So we'll start with item 1, apologies for absence, please.
I've received apologies from Councillor Kerry, Chair.
Thank you. Any other apologies?
May I add Sarah Sternberg, Monitoring Officer, Chair.
Thank you. We move to item 2 then, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interest not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. So presuming that there's no declarations at this moment. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. Approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2020. They have been circulated. Can we have a proposer that they are a true and accurate record, please?
Propose it, Chair.
I'll second it, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Shipman. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. So we move to item 4 then, reports of the external auditors from Mazars. So we have with us this afternoon Mr. Mike Norman. So welcome, Mr. Norman. So I'm going to hand over to you just to give us a preliminary outline, please.
Of course, yeah. Good afternoon, everybody.
there's two papers from us. The first paper relates to the audit strategy memorandum, which is one of the three main communications we have with the Audit Committee and sets out the work that we plan for the year. This was originally due to be issued, it was issued to officers in January and was due to be considered at the March meeting, which obviously was cancelled in the event of COVID. So given that it is a formal communication that we need to actually get to you, we've had to shift it to this agenda. Now it does overlap a little, well a lot, with another item on the agenda which we'll move on to in relation to the completion work. So I didn't want to go into too much detail because there is some overlap. But what it sets out is the significant risks that we identified for the audit year, provides an update on how we responded to those during the year, and also gives a link through to in one of the appendices the ways in which the council has considered the closed down issues relating to COVID. Given that there's overlap between this and the next report, which ties into the statement of accounts, our audit completion report, I didn't want to say too much more at this stage, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. So, memorandum, any questions? I think from my point of view, Mr. Norman, I think having read the memorandum, of course, it's the usual setting out of what we'd expect to see. Of course, Appendix 2 and the details about COVID are probably the issues that we are more interested in at this moment in time, seeing as we are possibly facing wave 2 and what happens next and the implications for this council. So I think as we move into the next part of your report, there'll be things that you may get questions on.
Sure.
If we all are accepting of the memorandum, we'll move to the audit completion report. Over to you, please, Mr. Norman.
Yep. So the purpose of the audit completion report is to communicate to you as a committee the main findings from our audit work. And to give you an understanding of any particular issues that we need to bring to your attention. This is so you again. I mean, I see the second item on the agenda is for you to formally consider the accounts that have been audited, and to give you some comfort or assurance over the content of those. But the actual paper I'm talking to, I think, was issued as a supplementary agenda item. And the main, I mean, what we include an executive summary within that. Page 6 of the pack, page 3 of our report gives paints a picture of the 4 main areas of our responsibilities. The first is in relation to the financial statements, and it's to confirm that what we're proposing to do is, subject to completion of the small number of remaining items, is to give an unqualified opinion on the financial statements that you've got in front of you. Second area relates to our responsibilities relating to value for money, and again we anticipate giving an unqualified value for money conclusion on that area. The third area is the whole of government accounts. We give confirmation to the National Audit Office regarding the return that the council itself needs to send off and whether that's consistent with the accounts that we've audited. We expect to be able to issue a clean opinion on that, but at this stage, because National Audit Office haven't actually confirmed their instructions, we need to wait until that's done. But that will follow the issue of the opinion anyway. The fourth main area is in relation to our wider powers. So we have a responsibility to consider any questions from electors, any objections, and there are also some other areas in which we've got the audit powers and can take action if need be. And it's really to confirm on that final area, we have received no questions or objections from any members of the public or electors, and there's no reason why we need to take any formal action in that area. On page 4 of our report, page 7 of the pack, we set out the kind of position on the audit at this stage. and we're pleased to confirm that they've covered 4 main areas there. Plant, property and equipment, we just need to tidy up some residual queries in relation to that area, and that should be done within the next week or so. We've referred into, and I won't go forward, there's within our audit opinion, we are proposing to give an emphasis of matter relating to the disclosed material valuation uncertainty that's in the council's accounts. Just what I wanted to confirm for the committee is that the material uncertainty that your valuers have reported in their valuation reports, again, ties back to the COVID situation and is entirely consistent with professional guidance that they've been given by Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Now, given that they've disclosed that material uncertainty, you've quite rightly referred to that in your disclosures to your financial statements. And what we're required to do as part of our audit opinion is just draw attention to that disclosure in your financial statements. So it's entirely consistent with virtually all of the clients in the public sector, well, in many sectors this year. And again, this isn't a qualification, but again, we just need to draw attention to that. On the pension side, there's one area of work where we rely on assurances from the Derbyshire Pension Fund auditors. That work's still in progress. We expect that again to be available within the next couple of weeks. The delay in the pension fund audit opinion again ties back to some additional testing I understand they've needed to do on the back of both the triennial review and as a consequence of the COVID implications on valuations of assets. There are no issues that we've been made aware of as part of that, but that work is subject to the final stages of their review. In the detail of our report, we've referred to a subsequent valuation report that officers commissioned relating to some changes in the liabilities on the pension fund this year, what's called the McLeod case. And so your officers commissioned a supplementary report to take into account those issues, and they have chosen to reflect the required valuation in the updated financial statements. So again, there's nothing else to report on that matter. I mentioned the whole of government accounts work, which again we're waiting on National Auditor Office instructions for, and it really then went to the final stages of the final stage review with a view to issuing the opinion. The deadline nationally for audit opinion is the end of November this year. Within our report, we've set out the changes to the timetable nationally. And as I say, at this stage, we expect to be able to complete that within the next couple of weeks, certainly well ahead of the end of November deadline. There are no other points in the audit report that I need to draw to your attention. I'm taking it as read. We've includes the information that required to bring to your attention. As I say, there are no unadjusted items above our reporting threshold that we need to flag to your attention. No internal control deficiencies. We flagged up clearly there are some issues relating to the impact of COVID-19 on your financial standing, as there is on every other local council going forward, and that has had an impact on both your own financial standing and the ways in which you're working. But we're not. We're flagging them more for issues to consider, to keep under a watching brief for 2021 onwards, and we will revisit those areas as part of future work. But they're the only points I wanted to flag. But clearly, if there are any questions from anybody as part of the report that we've put through, then I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Norman, are there any comments? Anything from our section 151 officer?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, I think as a council, it would be right for us to perhaps talk about the pensions considerations that you touch upon. And I think in due course, that's something from an audit committee that we may wish to revisit and have an interim report about progress on pensions. You have flagged it up, and rightly so, as part of your report to us. And I think as an audit committee, it's something we should keep an eye on. Of course, the COVID situation for us is as I've already said, the major consideration, I think what would be interesting for North East Derbyshire to do is a benchmarking exercise and how we fit against councils of a similar nature, and where we fit against them. We are hearing quite a few councils are experiencing financial difficulties, some talking about Section 114 notices, or the possibility of looking at how to rein in spending without issuing a Section 114 notice, so as near as they possibly can, but without doing that. Where does North East Derbyshire fit in relation to those councils? And we've not mentioned the B word, Brexit, and what Brexit might mean, a no-deal Brexit. I know it's referred to elsewhere in reports, but again, I think it would be remiss of us not to consider those and financial implications. Any comments on that, Mr. Norman?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I mean, both of those areas overlap with the value for money consideration and the separate report that we give on that. This was the 2019-20 is the final year under the current code of practice, which is updated every 5 years by the National Audit Office. Now, they've been very clear in their guidance to us in carrying out the assessment for this year that we need to look at 19-20 and the impact of, well, particularly COVID and perhaps in the more medium-term Brexit. Are there any illustrations of any sort of fundamental failings in your arrangements? Now, to some extent, or to a great extent, the implications from COVID have been largely unpredictable, albeit as a council you'd be expected to make sure that you're able to withstand some contingencies and deal with situations in that. Now, so given that there's that strict cut-off, that's why we've been able to issue an unqualified conclusion for 19-20. National Audit Office have been quite clear that they expect the focus on financial standing, resilience, and also long-term medium to long-term implications from Brexit and COVID-19 to form part of the 2021 value for money assessment. We were expecting some guidance around the particular areas of focus on that, what we're expected to consider and report on yourselves during the summer, but clearly, along with a lot of other plans, that hasn't transpired. So we will be considering the things you just mentioned as part of the 2021 work and reporting them both in our risk assessment in the audit strategy memorandum and in the audit completion report that we're bringing along to you at the end of the year. And clearly, we are aware, like yourselves, of some councils in some areas that are in quite significant difficulties at the moment. Where the Section 151 officer is having to take some of the more extreme measures required as part of that to deal with matters of urgency. I think in our report we have acknowledged the steps that were taken after the issue emerged to rebase the budget, to seek to use to access as many grants as possible, etc. And clearly the income compensation schemes available to you at the moment. We've commented on that, acknowledged that the council took the steps it needed to do, and those steps have been effective. Clearly, there's still a lot of uncertainty around this point, and we will need to revisit those themes and report back to you at the end of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going to your benchmarking idea, Martin, does that can we make that a recommendation from this committee that the council instigates that? I think it's what you said. I fully support, and I think there's all these things coming down the line, and the more prepared we are, the better. I quite like the benchmarking thing because obviously we're hearing other councils in a lot worse place than us, but the more we know, the better prepared we are. I just wondered, do we need to make that a formal thing or not?
I'm going to just ask the Section 151 officer to see if she's preempted me in thinking about a benchmarking exercise, and then we'll move back to your comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. We're already doing quite a lot of benchmarking. Some of it is in informal basis. I meet with my fellow Section 151 officers across Derbyshire every Wednesday afternoon, and we have done since the 20, whatever it was, of March, because of this very issue. And it's not just the budgets that are under pressure; it's the debt collection that's under pressure as well, which is going to affect all of our collection funds. So there's lots of issues for us to consider. So I wholly support it. We're also doing quite a lot of benchmarking on income with an organisation called Pixel Financial Management, who do a national benchmarking exercise, and they're pitching against authorities, so they'll put us into family groups. So I've got a wealth of information. I'd be more than happy to share it with the committee.
Thank you, and we'll be more than happy to see it. So I think, taking your recommendation, Councillor Barker, I think what we'll do is we will ask for this to be agendaed for our next meeting, so that what we will see is some benchmarked information. So if there's a wealth of it out there, we will be able to have a look at it, scrutinise it, and discuss the implications for North East Derbyshire. So we will include that on the next agenda. Any other comments or questions? If not, can we move to recommendations at paragraph 6? So we have 6.1 and 6.2. Do we have a proposer, please?
I'll propose them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shipman. Do we have a
There's a
second?
6.3 as well, is there? On the other side?
So that's Councillor Armitage. All in favour? Thank you. That's carried. So we are going to authorise the Chief Financial Officer to sign the letter on behalf of the Council. Thank you, Mr. Norman, for coming along, and thank you for your input today.
Thank you.
So we now move to item 5, reports of the Head of Finance and Resources and Section 151 Officer. So A is statement of accounts, please. You know what I'm going to say.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this is the report that presents the statement of accounts that Mike's just addressed in his audit completion report. So I'm not going to go through the numbers, but of course I'm happy to take any questions with regards to the statement of accounts that I can do. They're attached to Appendix 1 to the report, and that's what recommendations 6.1 and 6.2 of the report address. I would like to just touch on the assessment of going concern that we built into this report in some detail this year. Going concern as a concept is something that the councils have always had in existence. It's been in operational existence, and it's all about making sure that we can continue to operate for the foreseeable future. It's an assumption that underpins the accounts, and to be honest, it's largely been just an accepted state of affairs for local authorities. But with the advent of Northampton a few years ago, and particularly because of the COVID, it's something that we're wanting to give much more. We're wanting to bring more to the forefront, I think, for want of better words. So what I've tried to do in this report is build together an assessment of the going concern status of the council. And whilst this is retrospective looking at 2019-20 because it forms part of 2019-20's accounts, as Mike said, we've also got an eye on looking forward to 2021, and we need to have the confidence that the assessment for going concern can continue into the future years, especially as we're about to set a medium-term financial plan for the next 4 years. So the remainder of the report from 1.6 through to 1.2, it does go on quite a lot, I'm afraid. 1.25 is addressing that particular assessment. And I looked at things like the council's current financial position, the projected financial position, which is what we do through the MTFP, the balance sheet, the cash flow, the governance arrangements, and our regulatory and control environment that we're expected to operate within. Having done that piece of work, I do feel that I can offer some assurances that we are operating as a going concern. We have been able to produce a balanced budget, albeit taking account of the effect of COVID. And although I know it is going to be a challenge to us, I'm expecting that we're going to be able to produce a balanced budget for next year as well. So on that basis, I'm happy to recommend to the committee that we have done the assessment for going concern and that we are in a position to be able to continue with that position. And I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Well, I've got a couple, as you would expect. Obviously, COVID-19 set out at 1.12 in the covering report. Of course, there's greater concerns outlined and so on. But we also mention in the report itself about key strategic risks. And there is reference to the emergency plan enforced in March. Where are we now with the emergency plan, and how effective has it been?
My understanding, Chair, I'm not wholly responsible for this, as you'll be aware, but my understanding is that we do have two recovery plans. We have an internal recovery plan and an external recovery plan. They are monitored regularly through the senior management team. And I'd be happy for this committee to get an update at the next meeting, which I'm sure you'd welcome.
You must be a mind reader, because I think it's important that we do have sight of the recovery plans. I think it's very good for the Cabinet to be having an overview of it, but I think this is a committee that should see those internal and external recovery plans, and I think we should scrutinise them with regard to the financial implications or otherwise of their impact, because if there's a second wave and there's local lockdowns and all these sorts of things happening, we need to know what's happening for us next. And I think the other thing in terms of key strategic risks, you have also mentioned implementation of Brexit in the report. So I've already alluded to that previously in the last agenda item. So I think we shall watch with interest what happens next nationally, because there will be implications for us locally. So I think that's important that we should see. And I'm also interested to see impact of HS2 mentioned in the risk, key strategic risks there, and the electrification of the Midland Main Line on the environment, heritage, communities and businesses. And I think most of the council will be interested to look at the impact on our districts from HS2. Whether it's positive or negative, we will have to determine. I think people know my personal views on HS2. I'm totally against it, but I've set my cards out clearly on the table now. But I think it'd be important, where appropriate, for us to have an update on key strategic risks from this narrative report, an interim report at some point back for this committee to consider. Over to you.
Absolutely, completely agree, Chair. It is a standing item normally on the agenda, risk management. So I think this agenda is always quite busy because of the final accounts and because of the delays with COVID. We've got quite a heavy agenda. So I think that's absolutely right that we should bring an update on strategic risks and also the recovery plans, which should form part of that. So
thank you. I'm sure the committee will agree with that. And my own personal little favourite, on page 53 of the narrative report, we became the first district council to sign up to the British Sign Language BSL Charter. Then what?
My understanding, Chair, is that some work's been done on that recently, but I have to be honest, I'd get back to you on that one because it's not my area of speciality. So I will get back to you on that.
I'd be interested to see what happens. I think it's all very well signing up to things, and we can have a nice frame, something on the wall, but I would like to see impact for our residents who actually are deaf and have hearing loss. And we know that in this district, 1 in 5 people have hearing loss. So one of the financial implications of this is submitting money towards a scheme to support people with disabilities. And then if nothing comes of it, that's not money well worth spending. So I think we should be pursuing that to make sure that it happens and is implemented properly.
Happy to follow that up for you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do like this narrative report, Jane. I mean, it's clear, you know, and it does sort of link into the figures. I just want to refer you to page 60 or page 10, whichever one you want to look at. It's the general fund, and I'm just looking at that. There's a cumulative shortfall of 4.5 million by 23-24. That seems more than I'd got in my head. I thought we were 2.7 million, but that seems a lot. Can you just clarify that figure for me, please?
Yes, certainly can, Councillor Barker. It is 2.7 million in the final year of the MTFP, but we add all of them together, because if we don't make what we need to next year, that rolls over and rolls over and rolls over. So 4.5 million is a worst case scenario. Sorry.
That makes sense, but that, so we've got to make the savings prior to that, and we've still got 2.7 million down. That's
Absolutely. That's exactly where we're at. Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, and that's on top of the, that's before we've factored COVID in then, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a fun budget cycle this time.
Best of luck, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, just on the signing of the British Sign Language Charter, we had a presentation at full council not long ago about, weren't the council supposed to be introducing a system online where deaf residents could go on there and communicate via some system? I'm just reading on the website now, and it says that consultation with residents ended on the 9th of February 2020. What's actually happened with that? Because I've heard nothing back on any committees I'm on about whether we've implemented that. And looking at the website, it doesn't look like it's implemented at all.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Councillor Shipman, because I believe it wasn't actioned by the officer. So I think the same question that you've asked is a question that I would be asking again, that we agreed as a council that that would be a system we would implement as an improved communication tool. The people that came, well, as you will recall, went away with the idea that we were going to sign up to that communication system. We were even looking at possibly joining with Bolsover District Council for them to share in that, and for Ricknold, and nothing's materialised. I did speak recently with the chief executive of Ricknold, and we don't know where we are at with it. So I think the Section 151 officer has made some notes, so we can hopefully follow that up. So no one, Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the question of deafness, well, I'm not registered deaf, but I have impaired hearing, as has Councillor Jeff Lilly. And when we finally returned to the council chamber, I've asked on a number of occasions that we could have a better loop system, because as it is at the moment, the only sound we get is the 50 cycles per minute buzz, because the microphones are next to the fluorescent lights, and that's one of the background noises which we can hear fairly well. And I suggest, could the committee ask them to revamp it or get on with it, because we did ask at a previous, well, many moons ago, to get it sorted out. But I don't know if it's been done yet, because we haven't been in the council chamber, but it's just a memorandum if it has been or if it hasn't been done, and if not, why not?
I think it has been done, Councillor Armitage, because just before lockdown, workers did come into the chamber to improve the loop system. Of course, we won't know if it worked or not, because we haven't returned to be able to do that.
Right. Okay, thank you, Chair.
To improve your hearing of the council debates, but I'm willing to swap places with you and not hear council debates.
I'll leave it to you.
But yeah, but I think work has been done, but of course we haven't had the opportunity to test that out. So returning to the statement of accounts, all of this very relevant input, but returning to the accounts, we have got the recommendations set out at item 6. So do we have a mover for those, please? Thank you, Councillor Clough. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. All in favour? Thank you, that is carried. So we move now to corporate debt. Over to you, please, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present to members of the Audit Scrutiny Committee a summary of the corporate debt position, and I've done it to the 31st of August 2020 to make it as up to date as possible. This is a standard report that you get on a routine basis. However, it brings on a whole new significance as a result of COVID, as we were just talking about earlier. And it's likely to be a feature, I suspect, for many months and certainly potentially many years to come. During the early months of the pandemic, in line with the government guidance, the Council chose to not take any recovery action. And following the lifting of the national restrictions and after careful consideration and consultation with colleagues across Derbyshire, we've now come to the conclusion that we're going to start a process of soft recovery. What that's about is just re-engaging with our customers and trying to open up a dialogue and offer support rather than an active chasing of arrears at this stage. We just really need to start to re-engage. 6 months is an awful long time to not engage with your customers. So we haven't started that process yet, but we're going to be starting that in the next few weeks. And the plan is to carefully monitor the impact of that before we decide what next steps to take. So if anybody does have any feedback, we would welcome that greatly, because this is a dipping a toe in the water exercise. We're actually not too bad in terms of debt recovery at the moment. It's not great, but it's not as bad as we first thought it was going to be. The figures are there for you and to note, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, any comments or questions? Councillor Armitage?
Thank you, Chair. How many do we know yet? How many businesses have gone to the wall? So we'll never get the money.
Not at this stage, no, because we've not done the recovery action. We're yet to find out, other than people who've actually let us know that they're no longer in business. We wouldn't actually have an accurate figure on that at this stage. That's one of the reasons why we want to really start engaging with people, just to find out who's not there anymore and who's got difficulties. So no, I can't give you an actual answer on that at the moment.
Councillor Barker?
Sorry, I got me arrow in the wrong place. I think I'd support that what you've just said, Jane. I think it's I think we've got to be careful, haven't we? That if it's a balance between getting his money back and forcing businesses, out of business. So I think, like you say, a soft recovery is a way forward. But in the same breath, we've got to get us money in, haven't we? So it's a delicate one. But I support what you've just said, I think.
Thank you. From my point of view, I think it's a two-edged sword. Of course, one of the things we're talking about is the council's future and making sure that we're financially viable and, where possible, collecting money to support the council's work. But in the same breath, we are meant to be supporting the recovery of the district following COVID. And we're about to embark on a second wave. I think the statistics are clear. And is this the right time? That's my question. I think, can we not leave it before the soft recovery starts until maybe after Christmas, maybe start in the spring 2021, rather than just in a few weeks' time, just so that we can see how local lockdown data comes towards North East Derbyshire or a second wave, and just give businesses a little bit more breathing space.
To do is engage with them. So you have my assurances that before we do anything heavy-handed, right, we would certainly seek further assurances on that. We just want to re-engage, because I think one of the biggest problems that my Revs and Ben's team are having at the moment is a lack of engagement. And if we can just talk to people, we can start to make arrangements to pay. We're being incredibly flexible about how long we're letting people pay for. We're even going into future years. We just really need to engage with them.
Councillor Shipman?
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with you that we shouldn't be collecting anything yet. So, the government's income fund that they've just announced this week, I think, does that cover business rates and stuff, or is that purely for our own facilities that we've got?
You're just cutting in and out, Councillor Shipman.
Am I back yet? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Yeah, it was just the government's income fund that they just announced this week, I think it was. does that cover business rates and other incomes like we're talking about here, or is that purely for back? Like, does that cover the fund cover that as well?
Okay. Eugene.
Are you referring to the income compensation scheme? Is that the scheme that we're talking about?
I think so, Jane. Yes, I'll be honest with you. I don't fully know what it's called. I've just heard income and some fund about loss of income. I think it's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, the income compensation scheme is an absolute godsend to us, I have to be honest. What we're allowed to claim is, and we have to demonstrate that we've taken all action that we can to mitigate costs. So where we've made savings on utilities at the leisure centres, for example, or where we've been able to reduce costs through using the furlough scheme, etc., we do have to take account of that. So we're not getting gross income back. But the government scheme is actually paying out after the first 5% of our budget that we set last year for 2020. After that first 5%, they're committing to pay us 75 pence in the pound for the income that we're losing. So we've done the first claim today and that's gone in. And we're going to have another 2 claims. So they're doing them every 4 months until the end of the year. But that's going to help us massively because a lot of the leisure income that we're losing, and it's in the region of 1.4 million, we will be able to claim back through this scheme. So yes.
I think that's great. I think it's probably worth as well then trying to engage with these businesses and stuff as well, because I mean, at very least, we might be able to kind of signpost them to the grants and stuff that they've got access to obviously stop them going under, which is the main thing, because just before Christmas, last thing we want is people losing jobs and stuff.
Yeah, you want to come back on that?
Please, if I may. There is, I understand, because we've not gone into a local lockdown yet, it's not applied to Derbyshire yet, but I do understand that there are some further local lockdown measures that are available and in place specifically addressing that matter. So if we do go into another lockdown, I believe there are some more grants that we can access or that businesses can access via us, similar to the business grant scheme that we did way back in March that helped businesses out a lot, I know. So I do believe that there is something, but it's only accessible once you're designated as another local lockdown area. So fingers crossed that won't happen in Derbyshire, but if it does, then there is something.
I think it's not that it's just within our Derbyshire boundaries, that sometimes our neighbouring authorities are having issues, or neighbouring towns, cities, areas like Sheffield, really struggling, and numbers are significantly increasing in terms of COVID and what have you. And some, Sheffield is somewhere where we trade. So I think we have to be mindful of that sort of thing as well. Councillor Armitage.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to agree with you regarding the getting the debt recovered. If you're going too hard, you're going to put them out of business. And I think we've been really looking towards Easter before we can really start even asking, because we don't know, as Jane has said, we don't know how many businesses have already gone to the wall yet.
Is it the view of the committee then, if we think about the recommendations, that we note the report, but also that while we agree with the soft approach that's been outlined to the committee, because I think positive conversations with businesses as well, to signpost, to assist, to find ways that they can be helped, is all very, very positive. And also to assist them so they don't get into a position where the debt's built up to such a massive extent that they can't get out of the hole that they're in. We welcome all of that, but we wouldn't welcome a strong arm approach of bailiffs appearing at the door, that sort of thing. This is not a time for that. Does that sum up how we all feel? That's brilliant. Thank you. I'm getting a thumbs up from everyone, apart from Councillor Morley, who's in darkness. So with that, going to recommendation, can we have a proposal, please, that 6.1 is moved? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Second by Councillor Clough. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. And then we move to the next item, 5C. Yeah, it's my report. I think this is, for those of you who know me who've been on this committee for previously 8 years. I was on audit for 8 years, and I used to come up with the same mantra time and time again, And one of those is that the timing of our committee dates needs to be aligned with meetings of cabinet. There is no point in my submission in audit considering reports that have already gone to cabinet, have been and then been approved. There's no point in us actually looking at documents that come to us after the fact, when a quarterly report, for example, is well and truly gone, and we're considering old news. And officers will know that I used to say, what is the point of looking at this? It's old news. We need to be a council committee that's proactive, really scrutinising information, having our say in influencing the way that documents are shaped before they go to cabinet and to full council. Therefore, one of the things I'm saying in this report is that I think we should review the dates of the committee. I know they're set in the diary, but I think we should ask the Section 151 officer to come up with a new framework of dates to make them more realistic and put them in front of cabinet meeting times. And the other thing we need to be doing is revising our work plan in light of current events. And I'm suggesting implications of COVID, what a surprise, that we think about the implications of Brexit or a no Brexit deal. That we do continue with the work plan and looking at the cost of leisure services. We've just had a figure banded around this afternoon that is significant. And of course, we have to think about the subsidy of leisure and consider ways of improving that and assisting the situation. But other things on the work plan that talk about some of the things that we have talked about today. So we've talked about benchmarking. We've talked about the pensions. There's a whole list of things we've already agreed that should be part of our new work plan. So that's what I'm suggesting from myself. It's over to you for any comments or questions, please. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, I fully support that, Chair. I think that makes sense. And while we accept we're not the cabinet, but I think we can recommend things to the cabinet and look. And so I think the plan is that, or it used to be, and I know it gets changed for timings and things, but things should come to the audit committee first to look at before it then goes to cabinet and then possibly to council. I think that's the order it should go at. Hey up, Jerry. Jerry's appeared. But yeah, I fully support that, and I think the idea is, while it's, I don't know if it's classed as a scrutiny committee or not, the audit committee, because there's a thing around that, but we should be having that input definite to Martin, and I fully support and exactly the things that you've just said. The list of things is, the more that we look at them, the more that's the better way around, that we look at it first. Basically, I think you're right.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So I move to recommendations then, so that 6.1, that the Audit and Corporate Governance Scrutiny Committee, I just put that in for Councillor Barker's benefit, agreed to realign the work plan and future meeting dates to meet the objectives detailed in this report. And that we have a revised work plan to be presented to the next meeting of the committee. That's at 6.2. So I move those recommendations. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Clough. All in favour? Thank you, carried. So the next item then is revised budgets. Back over to you, please, Section 151 officer.
Thank you, Chair. I've been doing this job for a long time, and this is probably the most challenging budget that I've ever done, with the exception of what we're going to have to do for the medium-term financial plan. So we normally do this much later in the year, but it felt prudent to me to do it much earlier because of this unprecedented times that we're in with COVID. So in the spirit of what we've just discussed, this is the revised budget report that will go to Cabinet on the 8th of October. So this is the opportunity for the Scrutiny Committee to give its views and feed those into Cabinet for that meeting. It's a standard report. The revised budget goes through the General Fund, the HRA and the Capital Programme. So at Appendix 1, you'll find the summary for the General Fund for the revised budget, and Appendix 2 details the net costs for each cost centre. As we've discussed at length today, the COVID pandemic is really having an impact on the budget. It's predominantly fees and charges, and it's predominantly leisure. But we are losing out on other services, such as MOT testing was ground to a halt for 24 weeks. Commercial waste collections, we've had a number of suspensions and cancellations as a result. And of course, we're losing growth on business rates because whilst we're not being terribly detrimentally affected by non-collection at this stage, we're not getting the growth either. So all of these things are impacting on the budget. We have had £1.166 million in terms of government grant, which is greatly appreciated, I have to say. And the income scheme, as we talked about earlier, is going to help us a lot. I've put the claim in today for the first 3 months and it's £300,000. So that just gives you an idea of what we're actually losing month by month. If I can draw your attention to table 1 below 1.4 in the revised budget report, what I wanted to demonstrate in this is that the significance of the changes that we're talking about this year. So you'll see from the original budget, we were only planning to move £258,000 from reserves, but we're actually moving 1.9 million, and that's basically to prop up the leisure budgets, the loss of income that we've got. Now,
Jane, can I just stop you? Can you just, so we know where I'm looking at, can you just go back? Which table are we looking at? Sorry. The microphone's gone off. I can't hear it. Can anybody?
No, sorry, I turned it off. Do apologise, Councillor Barker. It's page 216.
So if you look at the actual report attached to the revised budget for item 5D.
I'm on it. Our on appendix. Sorry.
1.4, table 1.
Sorry, I got our on appendix. That's why I couldn't find it. Sorry.
No problem. So you'll see the second line down that talks about the revised budget. We're taking 1.9 million from the reserves this year, basically to prop up the budgets that are being hit hardest because of COVID. That sounds rather dramatic, but it's largely funded from the grant, which is largely funded from the money that we've got from the government. So it's not quite as bad as it initially looks like. The budget is covered off and balances by the use of the reserves this year, and the reserves have come from the government grant. So it's not quite as dramatic as it looks, but it does demonstrate the movement from where we were to where we are now. What table 2 just below that shows is how those income reductions are broken down, and then below that it also shows the efficiencies that we've identified in the budget that offset it by best part of £1 million. So the net increase to the revised budget is £1.3 million, and the table shows how it's funded. If we do get any surpluses arising this year, and I'm highly sceptical that we will, but if we do get any surpluses, we're going to move those to the resilience reserve, or it's proposed that we remove them to the resilience reserve to help against future budget pressures. And I just want to make a point at this, and I know I've laboured this point several times, but the impact of COVID on future year budgets is going to present a real risk to the MTFP going forward. We just don't know what's going to happen. We just don't know when we're going to be able to get back to anything like business as usual. And that's putting a huge pressure on our income streams. And I don't think we can rely on government funding beyond this financial year. We may be surprised, but I mean, it's a big ask. Moving on to the HRA, the only thing that's really been affected by the HRA is the level of voids. And that's simply because we haven't been having the turnaround times that you'd expect. People just haven't been moving as much. What we do with rents is we re-let at target rent rather than actual rent, which basically just means we move it up a little bit. Now that's negligible to the tenant, but it makes a big difference over 7,500 properties over the year. So we've just got a bit of a nudging down in the rents at the moment, nothing significant. And as for the capital programme, we did pause the capital programme at the outset because we just didn't know what the impact was going to be on cash flow. And during the lockdown, it was very difficult to do any major works anyway. But since the lockdown restrictions have started to be released, we're back up and running, and everybody's working really hard to recover the time that we've lost during that period. The appendices show all of the details, so I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. I'm happy to take any questions before we move back to the chair for the recommendations.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, just on the appendices, that's why I had a look through earlier, and appendix 2, I think I'm looking at. There are some big changes with the revised budgets. I'm looking at EH technical support. Are there any of these that we should be concerned about? Basically, is my question. It's difficult to scrutinise them, Martin. Not that's what we're doing.
I agree with Councillor Barker. Just before you ask any more about that Appendix 2, I saw some that had significantly increased from the original budget.
Yes.
I mean, I picked out 3401 food, health and safety. We've gone up to 40,000. 3409 EH technical support management. You've just mentioned nearly 50. 3423 air quality feasibility study. 57,000 we're suddenly wanting to put in. 3944 ground maintenance. We've gone up nearly £100,000.
Yes, that's the data. Yeah.
And there's lots of others. I mean, if you go on the other side, all those coded fives and so on, which is a lot of it's to do with swimming pools and things. We're going up from one. We've got 300,000 extra.
Yes. Yeah.
Or one. Cyber security, we're another 200,000. This is significant figures.
If I could, Chair, I'm happy to go through those because they're the ones I've pulled out as well, obviously, because I'm obviously as concerned of them as you. If I can take environmental health as a whole rather than all the individual ones, so the whole of the 300-400s range predominantly covers environmental health. There has been pressures in environmental health. I think it's been well documented. A number of reports have been taken to various committees about this recently. My understanding is that this has been addressed by the interim head of service for environmental health because they're having difficulties recruiting. They're having to use agencies, which we all know are more expensive than our own staff. And it has been a pressure on the budget. And the best I can offer you at this stage is that the head of service is addressing this matter. So I would hope that it's going to be resolved. It is something that we've actually flagged in the annual governance statement as a risk, you'll notice. So it is of concern to officers as well. So it's actually been flagged as a risk in the annual governance statement this year. So yes, that is a concern. Yeah,
I think you've talked about one there, but 5734 ICT service.
If I could just draw your attention,
gone up 200,000.
If I could just draw your attention to 5734, 5735 and 5736, those three together, there's been a restructure in IT and that's resulted in a change of cost centres. If you take the three together, it's actually a £45,000 loss. And if I could just, while we're on the subject, mention the air quality feasibility study, you're absolutely right, that is £57,000, but that's wholly grant funded. And that does happen through some of these. What happens above the line is the costs come in and then below the line, I move it out if it's a grant funded scheme, and the air quality feasibility is one of those sort of schemes.
Right. So does that explain 8441 Eckington swimming pool, we're suddenly forking out another 300,000?
That's the loss of income from the leisure.
Loss of income, 300,000?
Yeah, from the leisure centres being closed because of COVID.
Yeah, Dromfield Centre, similar.
All three.
Charlie Park, similar.
Yeah, devastating.
It is awful. Do we not care about business development anymore? 5736. Nearly, we've reduced it by nearly £250,000. Don't we care about business?
5734, 5735 and 5736 are all ICT. The three together come back to a total budget of £466,000. It's just a recoding issue, Chair.
Right. I think that will need to be made clear to the council when they look at this, because on the face of it, when you look at Appendix 2, the stark reality of some of this is quite breathtaking. And I think when you explain that some of it is about coding issues and some of them are bracketed together, and the explanations you've given, which are, clarify those sorts of things, would help members of council looking at a budget of this description. As I say, some of it is still shocking, and there are still some things that I think some heads of service and some portfolio holders will need to explain why there's sudden increases. I've just pulled out some examples, just like Councillor Barker did. There are others. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I suppose going back to where I started, exactly what you said, and I expected that because I've made myself looked after it times and said, well, why is that? And they've just moved it to somewhere else. So that happens, but I think a bit of a narrative report like you've done with the main budget would explain away some of those. There are, I mean, just to say, because, you know, that's the loss of income. I mean, that is, you know, it doesn't naturally say that that's loss of income. It looks like we've spent more rather than lost the income. So just a narrative alongside that would explain it. It don't take away that how much it is costing. I don't think it is. But the other examples that Councillor Thacker's just highlighted, that there's you know, can we afford to keep just be spending more on some things when we've got to save all that money? I suppose is the question.
May I, Chair?
Yes, over to you.
Councillor Barker, the intention, I absolutely take on board what you're saying. The intention of table 2 is to provide that overview of all of the key variances within the report. But I do accept that that is very high level, and it is unusual this year because it's predominantly loaded with income losses because of the COVID situation. But more than happy to put more narrative into the report. I myself go through every single line and know every single variances because I need to know. So more than happy to provide more information if that's what the committee would like.
Thank you. So it doesn't take away from the fact there are still concerns in that appendix 2, and you've highlighted quite rightly the one about grounds maintenance, which I'm pleased that you're aware of and share concerns as well. I think there are, as I say, 1 or 2 others like that where you think, well, somebody's got to explain how we got to that revised figure. I thought at one point, and this certainly was talked about at the VIPA meetings when we had them, that we had a moratorium on expenditure and we had a moratorium on things like recruitment. And I think we still ought to be mindful of those sorts of things as we are still in COVID. We have not left COVID. We're not in a post-COVID situation. And I'm not aware of anywhere where there's been an update on the moratorium and how that's actually helped to support the council and where we're at.
If I may, Chair, that was taken to Cabinet as the quarterly budget monitoring report. So I have been updating Cabinet.
So Cabinet know, but we don't.
Well, hopefully with the new timetable, you will know first.
Okay, see, I rest my case.
Your case is made well.
Are there any other comments or questions on that? My only other one is to do with Ricknold. 1.7 in the report, main report itself on page 117. We've talked about Ricknold, and it goes over the page about the 2021-22 fee. Do we have any ideas what will be happening with that fee, and where are we with Ricknold?
The short answer is no, we haven't set the fee yet. We'll do that as part of the medium-term financial plan. So I will be doing it in the next couple of months. So the short answer is no, I haven't got a view as yet.
Right. I'm sure that could be something that comes to our next meeting for us to have a comment about and discuss Ricknold and so on. Councillor Shipman?
Just on Ricknold, Chair, given the fact that we give them best part of 10 million quid, wouldn't it be prudent if we saw what their budget looked like and whether theirs is going up and down in certain places so we can actually scrutinise that expenditure? Because to me, that's a large portion of any DDC's budget, and it's, you know, if people ask us, well, what's it spent on? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd just go, it's on houses. I wouldn't be able to tell you whether it's the management of the houses, whether it's the voids, whether it's getting people into homes or what. And I think that we should actually get this information in front of us if possible.
Is that a recommendation, Councillor Shipman, that it's added to our work plan?
It is.
That's brilliant. So we can add it to our work plan. Did you want to respond to that, Mr. Dethick, or are you going to let Councillor Barker come in?
Councillor Barker first.
Yeah, just on that really. I mean, with me ex-Ricknold hat on, is that Ricknold have got, well, I know it's all changing or in process of changing with the boards and things, but Ricknold get that money and they've got like a finance sub board, if you like, that then looks at they look at what happens with that money, and it's all, I think it's all on the Ricknold website, and say we can see it, but I think I don't know now. Again, Jane, I'm looking for advice with the changes, how much influence we allocate them the money, and Ricknold when it was an Almo, I don't know, I don't think it is anymore, but when it was an Almo, they basically got that money and could do what they like. You know, it were up to the board to decide what happened with that money. The council just decided how much they got. So I'm not quite sure with the new arrangement how much influence we can still look at it and see, because I think that's been a question from our group. Well, where's that money being spent? It is on the Ricknold sort of websites and things. You can find it, but it's a lot easier if somebody's telling you, isn't it? So just a bit of guidance, Jane, really, how much influence we've got in all that.
In response to your comments, Councillor Barker, I mean, I think you're mixing Davy Crockett up with the Alamos and Almos.
Did I say Alamo?
You did say Alamo, yeah.
Brilliant.
But so we're not thinking about Davy Crockett. In terms of the fact it is public money from this council that's used, and nobody's disputing about the way it's used. And I'm sure it's been used in the best way possible. But we still have a responsibility to scrutinise what Ricknold is doing with that public money. And it's not just about the management fee, it's about the whole setup of Ricknold. And I think it's a welcome opportunity for representatives of Ricknold to come along and talk to us. You know, we are meant to scrutinise them, and I would expect that they expect to be scrutinised. I'm sure the chief executive would expect to be scrutinised. I'm sure she wouldn't mind coming along. In fact, it would be an opportunity for her to share with us how proud she is of the organisation and talk to us about all sorts of things, and we can ask those questions we want to ask. I think that sums it up for me. So I've asked the Ricknold. Anything else on the report? If not, can we move to recommendations at paragraph 6? Do we have a proposer, please, for those? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shipman. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. So we now move to item 6. We don't have the monitoring officer here. So the annual governance statement, is that over to you?
I will take that one, Chair, in
Yes,
the
thank
monitoring
you.
officer's
Over to you, then.
absence. I'm not an expert on the annual governance statement, so please bear with me on this one. I'm pretty much just going to paraphrase the report. But as you'll all be aware, as part of the statement of accounts, the council is required to make an annual governance statement, and preparation of the statements need to be in line with the SIPFA Society of Local Chief Executives and Senior Managers, SOLAS for short. And there's a framework for that. So basically, there's a framework that identifies that local authorities should be behaving with integrity, openness, demonstrating sustainable economic, social and environmental benefits. And there's a whole list of things that we should be checking against. And part of the reason that we do the annual governance statement is to provide that annual assessment process to do that. So you'll find a copy of the annual governance statement, Appendix 1. It has been reviewed this year and shortened to hopefully make it slightly more readable. I know it's been quite unwieldy in the past, so we'd be happy to take your feedback on that and as to whether it is a little bit more accessible and readable. We then also do a review of the Code of Corporate Governance, which is at Appendix 2, and that's measured in line with the SIPFA SOLAS basics again, and we do a benchmarking exercise, which is at Appendix 3. I appreciate there's an awful lot of information in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 to wheel through, but Sarah and myself have been through that in detail and done the self-assessment. And then at Appendix 4, there's a draft memo from this committee that the Chief Financial Officer, the Monitoring Officer, to the Leader of the Council and Head of Paid Service, which recommends that the annual governance statement gives a true and fair view of the Council's position within the authority. And it's for those to sign off. So there's a recommendation at the end of this report that you give authority to the Chair of this committee to sign the annual governance statement on your behalf this year.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Any comments or questions? Just a couple from me. First of all, on the role of the Audit Committee, which is on page 241 of the bundle, in the box there, the very first bullet point, agreeing the annual governance statement and the annual statement of accounts. It makes us sound like we're a rubber stamping exercise, and I don't believe we are. I think that's probably not the right wording for it. So I think that there needs to be a change of vocabulary there, rather than agreeing. I think we're a bit more than that. It could be scrutinising the annual governance statement and the annual statement of accounts, probably, and then approving, rather than making it sound like we're just, as I say, a rubber stamping exercise. And I do believe there should be another bullet point, because there's only 4. Because another role that we take as one of our main functions is looking at the accountability of the council's income and expenditure decision-making processes and their impact on the district. That's my other bullet point. And my other comment relates to Appendix 1, page 245 of the bundle, on the coronavirus pandemic, the council's response. I actually think we've undersold ourselves. There's not enough information about the council's response, the impact on our services. We haven't talked about all the other things that this council has done in terms of impact of our services, and particularly the support in our community. All the things that we covered during our Viper meetings, all the things that we did to actually support the community during that time. I'm sure there'll be minutes of our Viper meetings that can provide evidence of some of the things that we did, could be added to make that a more robust explanation of the council's response. Again, the plans for recovery seem a bit feeble. I think we did a lot more than that. We also made some decisions relating to moratorium on expenditure, recruitment, and so on as a result of COVID. So I think they ought to be reflected in there. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chair. I must admit I'd not read it word for word, this bit, so I have missed that bit, Paige. I apologise, but yeah, I fully support. And I think the thing we did with the Twin Oaks and the homelessness, and because I know I think you had a part to play in that, you know, coordinating all that, like. So I think we were leading it as the North East, weren't we, in some way in setting that up. No, I think you're right. I think if we can sort of put in a lot more as how this, well, I think, and again, I'm praising you, Martin, but I think we led on a lot of things. North East Derbyshire, we were the first to instigate quite a lot of the things, you know, that others followed, if you like, and I think we should definitely big that up. And yeah, and regarding your bullet point thing, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know how generic these statements are. You know, they just copy and paste from another one and just change name. I don't know, but that's definitely something we could add. That bullet point for me. Thank you.
I think we did lead, and I will say that as a district council, we were doing a lot more than others across the whole of the county, and it doesn't feel like it's reflected in the statement. I've seen in reports elsewhere, I think people refer to all the work we're doing. There's lots of cross-referencing. I think if we're going to do a statement that summarises those 3 areas, I think we can do better than that. Any other comments or questions? Anything from the Section 151 officer in response to all of that?
No, we can make those changes, Chair. That's absolutely fine. The recommendation at 6.1 asks for the committee's observations and recommendations prior to the final version being incorporated. So we'll add those in, and then I believe 6.3 then gives you the authority to sign it off without it coming back to committee.
Thank you. And Councillor Shipman?
It's just a concern about what's written as a mitigation for the failure to adopt the local plan. In the report, it says obviously one of the issues is local plan's been failed to be adopted.
Page 242 of the bundle.
Yeah, 242, bottom right box of the table. It just says the council is in an advanced stage in preparation of the local plan. That just tells me where we currently are. It doesn't say what we're actually doing to hurry that along. when we expect it to be adopted, which is I'm sure the date that myself and many other committee members would like to hear when it's expected. You know, even a rough date, you know, is it 2021? Is it 2022? Is it, you know, when we're up for election again? When is it, when is it due? Because I don't feel we're getting any information about this. And I know it's an issue which resonates with a lot of people in many areas across North East Derbyshire. So it'd be nice to know if we can actually get a firm mitigation of the failures to adopt the local plan rather than just telling us where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think if you go on to page 243 at the top, it then carries on with a bit more information about what the council has done. But I think the sentence there that we're at an advanced stage in preparation of the local plan, I don't think any of us would know that it is. And probably, from my point of view as the chair of this committee, I would probably strike that sentence out. I would strike the sentence out and then leave it that the council has taken steps in the preparation of the plan with requirements. I know there's been legal comments and so on, and taking advice, and that there's been consultation undertaken during 2019-20. I'd probably take out the word considerable.
I'd like to know what these steps are that have been taken and what actually the advice is, because I think that is the mitigation in what should be in this report. It's all well and good, you know, we're doing something. Well, this committee needs to know what it is we're doing to mitigate that risk.
Yeah. No fair comments. Does anybody else want to add to that? Does anybody know anything different? Or do we feel that that box ought to be revised to explain that there has been a pause in the local plan and that the plan has been restarted? But I think we don't know much more than that really at this stage. Is that a fair reflection?
Yeah. I think we need to know more.
Councillor Armitage, are you wanting to speak or are you just waving at me?
Yeah. I think the situation with the plan is that it was paused. It then went to the examiner, who then sent it back with some recommendations, which were done, and then it's been sent back to them again. And I would hope that it's going to be all done and dusted by Christmas. But I understand that the examiner was on holiday recently, so allowing for holidays, it could or should be done, I would hope, by Christmas.
Yeah, I think what we're dealing though is conjecture here, rather than, you know, we hope or we might think or whatever. I think who we know, and I think all we know is that the plan's been paused. It's been reopened for further comments to be sent to the examiner, and I think that's where we're at. I don't think committee we can say more than that.
It's with the examiner at the moment.
Well, then that's all we know it's at. So I think if we could just revise the statement to be one that's probably a bit more realistic for this committee to support. Are we all happy with that? Yeah, thank you. Right, that's lovely. Thank you. So thank you for that. It will come back to myself for final comment, so I will look at that one specifically, and I will look at the others we've just talked about. So with all of that in mind, we move to the recommendations from 6.1 to 6.3 inclusive. So can we have a mover for those, please? Thank you, Councillor Clough. Seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And the next one is reports of the Internal Audit Consortium. So am I handing over to Jenny? Over to you then, please.
Thank you. Yes, so the first report is our annual report for 1920, and this summarises the work we've undertaken in 1920 compared to the original plan. So the content of the report was what's advised by the public sector internal audit standards. So in spite of COVID-19, we did complete the majority of the 2019-20 plan, and that means that I can give an opinion on the council's internal control environment. The table on page 2 shows that we issued 24 reports in 2019-20, and you'll be very pleased to know that all of those reports were in our top 2 categories of assurance, which are substantial and reasonable, and we see both of those as being positive assurances. So all of these reports have been included on progress reports to the committee during the year, the last of which is later on the agenda today. Appendix A, that shows you, that details all of those 24 reports for you, and the exact opinion for those areas, and the opinion the previous time that we looked at them. You'll be pleased to know that we didn't identify any fraud issues during the year. The table on page 3, that looks at our key performance indicators. We completed 86% of the plan against a target of 96%. And I say that was due partially to COVID hitting in the middle of March. We did lose 2 auditors during the year. And we also had 2 sit for apprenticeships, and there's quite a time commitment involved in training those staff. So for 2021, I've reset the target at 75% for the 2021 plan, and we'll keep that under constant review and revision. The rest of the indicators were all positive. It's really pleasing to see customer satisfaction rates up at 94%. Paragraphs 1.8 to 1.11, they detail the overall conclusion on the council's control environment. So in my opinion as audit manager, we can give reasonable assurance as 100% of areas did receive those substantial or reasonable assurance opinions. The internal control issues were considered in terms of the annual governance statement and if anything needed to be included. And we did determine that we didn't think there was anything of such significance from our work that needed to be reflected in the annual governance statement. So paragraph 1.15, that details the comparison of planned work against completed. So we didn't complete 4 reviews. One of those elections was brought into 2021, and we have now just issued that report. 2 other areas, IR35 and the use of consultants, we've carried those forward into 2021. We didn't undertake the main accountatory and budget control audit, and we're not going to do that for 1920 now because we have undertaken a comprehensive review against the SIT for Financial Management Code. So moving on to compliance with the public sector audit standards. In May, I undertook a self-assessment against the standards, and in my opinion, we are meeting the standards. In October 16, we had an external review, which did agree that we're compliant with the standards. There's an agenda item later on about the external review because we do have to have one every 5 years, and so that is due again next summer. We do have quality control procedures in place, and I make sure that all my staff are aware of the standards that they should be adhering to. I can confirm that we are independent. I do have direct access to the strategic alliance management team if I need it, and again to yourselves. I do think agenda today for you to approve. So the recommendation is the Internal Audit Consortium Annual Report for 1920 be noted, and I'll try and answer any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? No. Councillor Clough, all in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So we're moving on to the review of the Internal Audit Charter. So back to you, which you've already alluded to.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is a review of our charter, which they used to call it the Terms of Reference, but it's called the Charter now. This committee last approved this 2 years ago in June 2018. And the public sector standards do require that we have this charter to define our purpose, authority and responsibility. There haven't been any changes to the public sector internal audit standards since I wrote the charter. And so on reviewing the charter, I do think it's still fit for purpose. I've just updated a few of the job titles in there. CIPFA are recommending now that we do bring the charter every year instead of every 2 years. So I will be bringing it every year from now on. But the recommendation is that members note and agree the outcome of the review of the charter.
Yeah, thank you. I'm assuming that the change of titles were on page 301 of the bundle, 38.
Sorry, I've got different page numbers to yourself, but it's basically the chief exec title changing to Director of Corporate Resources.
That's what I'm referring to. Any comments or questions? Councillor Barker?
It's just a comment, really, and because for my sins, I'm also on Audit Committee at the County Council, and they're having same issues, you know, with COVID and one thing or another, but they've also had issues recruiting people. And I think you just said something there that you've lost 2 members of staff during the year, and it seems to be basically, I know at the County Council, they can't get these people to do internal audits. Are we all right at our end, at this end?
At the moment, we're fully staffed, and we did manage to recruit, fortunately, a couple of years ago, a very experienced senior internal auditor. But I think we were quite lucky to get him, because I've seen the County Council adverts and the difficulties in recruiting. We have recruited an internal auditor who's got different experience. We are going to have to actually train him up because he hasn't got much internal audit experience. But we've looked at other qualities that we wanted, and we're happy that he had those and that we will be able to train him. But we are fully staffed at the moment, thankfully, because there is a shortage of professional internal auditors out there.
Thank you. So any other comments or questions? We move to recommendations at 6, that's 6.1 to 6.3 inclusive. Do we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Clough. Seconder? Councillor Armitage, thank you. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So next one, external review of internal audit.
Thank you. Yes, this is just to advise you really that our external review is due. The public sector internal audit standards do require that we have an external review every 5 years. And that's really so you're not just relying on taking my word for it that we are doing what we're supposed to do. So the external reviewer comes in to give you the assurance, hopefully, that we are performing in line with best practice and adhering to the standards. So as I said, we had our last review in July 16 and the full results were reported to this committee in the October. So they do require that I just consult with members about the proposal. So the main aspect of the review will be to complete the public sector internal audit standards checklist, and that should tell us if there's any areas where we need to improve. If we get an experienced reviewer, hopefully they'll be able to pass us on some ideal ways that other councils are operating as well. So I'm proposing to go out and get some quotes from suitably qualified parties. We do think that's a better option than doing a peer review. They haven't taken off in the Midlands. I think it's the fear that they'll potentially sour relations with other councils. I did survey the Midlands Audit Group to try and find out who they'd use to establish who to ask to quote. It's a very small number, actually. One person had used the Institute of Internal Auditors, 8 had used Robin Pritchard from Gateway Ashore, and he actually conducted our last internal review, and 8 had used CIPFA or the 2 CIPFA representatives in their private companies. So those 2 parties are both really experienced people that I would certainly start with asking to quote. So I'm asking that the committee delegate authority to myself and the Section 151 officers to set a specification for the review. So in that specification, we'd be asking them to completing the checklist, and they do that by looking at our working processes, looking at our documentation, speaking to officers, probably speaking to the chairs of the audit committee so that they could form an opinion on how we work. I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
My question was about the budget set for 10,000. Is that?
That is,
because that could be more than we need, based on last time was 3,600.
I'm hoping it won't come in at that much. Again, it depends. There's quite a big price discrepancy. If you use Sitford, certainly last time when we went to tender, they were a lot more expensive than the company that we used in the end. So it's getting a balance between cost and quality, which we'd certainly use in the specification, and when assessing the quotes, we would get a balance between cost and quality. So given the price last time, I would hope it would come under. That's a cautious estimate, but again, I'm not sure how much they will have gone up in 5 years.
What would happen if it's not a cautious estimate? Would you need to come back before this committee?
Fortunately, it's split 4 ways, because so for each council, hopefully it wouldn't be an extortionate amount more, because the cost is split between Derbyshire Dales, North East, Bolsover and Chesterfield. But if it was dramatically different, I guess we would have to consult with the accountants and come back to the committee to say that we needed more money. But it is something that we do have to do to comply with best practices, have this review.
Yeah. Let's hope it's not 40,000 then, split 4 ways.
Yeah.
All questions? If not, then can we move to recommendations at section 6, 6.1, 6.2? Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Shipman. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Armitage, all in favour? That's carried, thank you. And then the next one, progress update on the 2019-20 and 2020-21 internal audit plans.
Thank you, that's my last one. Yeah, so this report hopefully summarises for you the work we've been doing. As mentioned earlier, we have substantially completed the 19-20 plan. We were late completing that plan, I say, due to the reasons already given, partly COVID, partly staff shortages and training commitments. And that will have a bit of a knock-on effect on our ability to complete the 2021 plans. And if we go into lockdown again, that will also make things harder for us. As we were in recovery, we were finding it easier to progress audits. I guess the future's a bit unknown, but we will try our best to continue as we can. If you turn to Appendix 2, this period we've issued 13 reports, 8 with substantial assurance and 5 with reasonable assurance. So that's really an excellent set of results. And there's no particular issues in relation to those audits that I feel I need to bring to your attention. Again, we haven't identified any fraud issues that you need to be aware of. Appendix 3, that's a new appendix to just try and give you an idea of how we're progressing on the 2021 plan. So at the time of the writing this report, we'd issued 4 reports. Since then, we have also issued procurement and elections. The results I'll bring next time. We're also very close to issuing the asset management report. So at this time last year, we had issued slightly more reports than that, but we're not drastically behind. In October, I'll be taking out a mid-year review of the plan and talking to the Section 151 officers to see if there's any higher risk areas that we perhaps need to supplement our plan with, and we'll keep working on the plan as best we can. So the recommendations is that the report be noted and that there is an impact of coronavirus on our ability to complete the whole of the current year plan. But I'm hopeful at the moment that we will achieve enough of the plan for me to be able to provide an audit opinion on for 2021 and try and answer any questions.
I'm just trying to find Appendix 3. One of the new things that's been added is ethics. So what sort of issues are you going to be covering in ethics, or is the only way ethics?
It's not an audit we've done before, it's a new audit for us. We have done it in different elements before, but it's pulling things together. So it is looking at governance arrangements, transparency, things like look at officers' expenses, recruitment and selection, making sure we've got things in place in terms of governance. It's quite wide ranging and getting an overall view on, is there a code of conduct? Is that regularly reviewed? There's a whole raft of things we'd look at within that area.
And the layer of acetate that you're putting across all of these will be COVID, of course, and the impact of COVID.
Yes, on all the audits we're doing, we'll have to consider if the impact of COVID has affected the controls in place at all, and what the impact of that has been.
Good. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? No. So move to recommendation then to section 6. And 6.2, we've just mentioned that, so that's particularly relevant about the impact of coronavirus on all of this work. So do we have a proposer for those recommendations? Councillor Clough, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Shipman just made it, and all in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you for that. So item 8, there are no other items that are considered as a matter of urgency. So can I thank you for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you.